This week, DC Comics announced Superman Day on April 18th. So, in honor of that, I wanted to cover one of my all-time favorite Superman stories, Superman for All Seasons. I haven't read this story in years. I've always been a huge Tim Sale fan, so that was the reason I originally picked up the comics in the first place, way back when. But it had been so long since I read it that it almost felt like reading it for the first time. I remember bits and pieces, but rereading the entire thing again gave me a new appreciation for not only the amazing artwork by Sale, but the story in general. So let's dive into this great comic book. The first thing you need to know is, if you're expecting big action-packed superhero battles because it's a Superman story, you need to forget about that. This story is about subtleties, for lack of a better word. You're not going to see Supes fighting Metallo, Bizarro, or any other big villains. Lex Luthor plays an important part in this story, but it's not the bald-headed villain most have come to know. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The book is broken up into 4 seasons, quote-unquote. We start out in spring, and with a young Clark Kent, a senior in high school, still trying to figure out his life and these powers he has. But it's not only Clark. Pa Kent is coming to terms with it too. There's a scene here where there's a giant boulder in the way of Pa's tractor out in the field. Clark comes by and Pa tells him he's going to need some leverage in order to get it out. Clark, thinking nothing of it, picks up the boulder right away with one hand and asks his father where he wants him to put it. Pa doesn't answer him. Instead, he quietly walks away, back towards their home where Ma is getting supper ready. At first glance, it might seem like Pa is upset or something at Clark, but as you read the story, he's not upset. He's coming to terms with Clark and his powers, but also with acknowledging that there are things his adoptive son can do that he probably can't even imagine. This quiet, unsure moment from Clark, where he's wondering what's wrong, is really kind of the theme of the entire story. Superman for All Seasons is a Superman story about a young man learning who he is, what he can do, and how to handle it. Actually, the late great Tim Sale, in an interview with the Comics Journal from 2008, said, "If you're Superman, you can do a lot more obviously than other people, but you're still going to be constrained by what you can and can't do. The story is about what you can't do." The other interesting thing I loved about this story is that each of the 4 chapters, or issues as they were originally published, are seasons, and each one is narrated by 4 important people in Clark's life. Spring is narrated by Pa. In the words written by Jeff Loeb, we get a real sense of confusion from Pa Kent. He loves his son, but he knows he can't really do anything more for him, at least in a physical sense. He's shown him all the things a father can show his son, but Clark has these powers that are developing. Pa isn't sure how to handle that, both for himself and Ma Kent, but also how to handle that when dealing with Clark directly. Spring ends with Clark sharing his secret with Lana Lang as he takes her flying over Smallville. We're not given any answers as to what happened between them until later on in the book. So now we get into the second part of this book, Summer, and we're given a time jump. I've tried to figure it out, but I'm not sure how big of a time jump this is. I want to say it's between 3 and 5 years, maybe something like that. Clark now lives in Metropolis, and Summer is narrated by Lois Lane, who is clearly infatuated with this new hero, Superman. But it's during Summer that we're also introduced to Lex Luthor. This Lex Luthor takes inspiration from more of the classic Luthor, and he even has orange hair. He's a multi-billionaire that despises the infatuation that all of Metropolis has with Superman. The design of Metropolis is such a juxtaposition of that of Smallville that Tim Sale designed. He mentioned in past interviews he was going for an Americana vibe for Smallville, and that feeling really came through in his art. And then, when we get to Metropolis, Sale truly designs the city of the future. Skyscrapers line the sky, but there are also walkways hundreds of feet in the air. It's on one of these walkways where Superman saves a boy who trips and is about to fall while playing. I do remember thinking at the first time I was reading this, why is he playing all the way up there? But upon second look, there are hundreds of people walking on these pathways in the big city. It's just a normal spot to be, it seems. We get a little more traditional action during Summer. Lois is covering all the heroic exploits of Superman, much to the chagrin of Lex Luthor. It's here that it's established that Superman does have a very terse relationship with Lex. Neither one trusts the other. Superman is keeping an eye on Luthor, just waiting for the billionaire to make the wrong move and prove publicly that he's the criminal Superman knows him to be privately. Luthor despises Superman. Lex feels like Superman has taken over the hearts and minds of the city of the metropolis. Despite the action of this chapter, the heroic antics of Superman stopping a missile and lifting a submarine out of the ocean filled with terrorists, and even the flirtatiousness between Superman and Lois, the chapter ends grounded in what the book is really all about: Clark finding himself. Despite everything he's been doing in Metropolis, he comes back to Smallville to visit Ma and Pa, and he's still not sure of himself. He says as himself when Jeff Loeb writes Ma Kent asking if Clark has come to visit for any special reason. Clark looks down at the table with a forlorn look and replies, "I don't know. Lonely, I guess." Clark wants to help people as Superman. That's why he left Smallville, but he's still figuring out just who Clark Kent is. This leads us up to fall, and at the end of summer, Superman has saved a woman, a brilliant biochemist who Luthor plans to use in some sort of nefarious scheme to attack Superman. This is the one part of the story that I just don't really get, I didn't connect with. See, this woman who Superman saved, Jenny Vaughn, has developed an obsession with him, and Lex is using that obsession, but I don't really understand how he's doing it. Maybe it just went over my head or something, but he has her strapped to a chair, her eyes forced open to watch Superman saving the day. But she's already developed this obsession with him, so I didn't see the point in that part. How is forcing her to become even more obsessed with him going to help Lex's plan to use her biochemistry knowledge? I don't know, I didn't really get it. In any event, Lex's own form of obsession with Superman means he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure Superman leaves Metropolis. And the way he does this isn't through some mechanical robot or hiring some sort of supervillain, but it's through the woman Superman saved. Somehow, Luthor has poisoned the entire city of Metropolis. What happens next is the woman that Superman saved is presented to him in a new form from Lex Luthor. She's become some kind of twisted hero that Lex has created, calling herself Toxin. She has a cure for the city, and as Superman flies her above, she releases it into the air. The city starts to come back to life, but as they land down, Toxin dies. Again, maybe it goes over my head, but I'm not exactly sure why she dies. I think it's from the toxin in her own blood, or maybe the toxin that she spreads out to save the city kills her. I don't really get it, but I'm just go with it. So, either way, the important part though is that she does die in Superman's arms. Remember, this is a young Superman. Even during the summer chapter, when Lois Lane's fawning over the superhero, he's still learning who he is. He's still figuring out what these powers mean and who he should be. And now he has to come to grips with a woman he thinks died because of him. We, the reader, know it's not because of him. It's something Lex Luthor has done, but Superman doesn't. And in this most vulnerable moment, with Toxin dead, Luthor stands over Superman and says, "They say you can change the course of a mighty river, but you have so little understanding of how fragile the human condition is, how easily a life, all life, can be lost. Being the most powerful man in the world means nothing if you are all alone. No one knows that better than I. Go back to wherever you came from before you fail us all." And with that, the chapter ends with Clark returning to Smallville, unsure what to do next. So now we come to Winter, the final chapter of the book. It's narrated by Lana Lang. After Clark confessed his secret to Lana, she left Smallville. She admits she thought she was going to marry the farm boy at one point in time, but the prospect of that reality all came crashing down around her when he told her the truth about himself. So she left to see the world and find herself and who she was in this new world with Superman out there. There's a double-page splash of Clark talking to Lana, who's come back to Smallville. We see that Lana is older and wiser now. She knows who she is, but Clark, being home for this period of time, is still trying to figure it all out. Clark is wearing his high school letterman's jacket. Lana asks if he's going to wear the jacket. "Why, is something wrong with it?" Clark asks back. "No," Lana replies. "It's just I don't know a lot of grown men who still wear their high school letterman's jacket." I don't think this is meant to be a slight towards Clark. I think Jeff Loeb is still trying to show how Clark hasn't evolved. He hasn't grown. He hasn't found out who he is. Lana and Clark travel into town, and it's here Clark is met with another confrontational statement, although this one is much more obvious. Pete Ross, Clark and Lana's friend from high school, throughout the entire book is filled with dreams. First, it's when they are graduating. He wants to leave Smallville and make a name for himself. Then, when Clark comes home to visit the first time, Pete Ross is still in Smallville. He seems a little annoyed at that he's stuck in the small town. And he's surprised that it was Clark and not him who went on to make a name for themselves in the big city. He even asks Clark about Lex Luthor and if he's ever met him. But now, when Clark comes home, truly unsure of himself, Pete Ross is downright nasty. Pete's almost insulted that both Lana and Clark left Smallville and are now back in the town. He almost comes across as a person who's jealous that they've experienced the world outside of Smallville while he's been stuck in it. Even in his contempt, Pete shows growth. Whatever dreams he had, whatever plans that didn't come to fruition for him, he's angry about it. He's insulted that Lana and Clark are back in town doing what he's doing, just living day to day instead of experiencing life outside. And again, Clark has no answer for this. This all comes to a head as they are having dinner, but a storm hits Smallville. The next day, the family is going to be driving through the storm to get to safe ground because a dam is threatening to break. Paul wants Clark to go ahead of them to help other people. So, dressed as Superman once more, he's about ready to leave, but he still comes off as uncertain. Lana's been able to sense this the entire time they've spent together, and she tells him that even though he can do all these incredible things as Superman, that it doesn't make it any less hard to be who you want to be, and that the boy she remembered growing up with, who was noble and caring, was still inside that costume. Then she tells him, "Go make things safe, Superman." Clark does just that, keeping the dam from breaking and also saving Pa Kent and Shelby the dog from an accident on a bridge. Clark's time in Smallville ends as the town is gathered around a local church and the pastor is encouraging everyone to not give up hope, to remember to be brave and strong despite what they've just faced, and that there will always be seasons of difficulty. It's such a great written line and equally matched by Tim Sale's art, where it's written, "We can be grateful for the seasons, no matter how cruel or harsh they may seem. For it is only through their passage that we can truly appreciate the future." Clark heads back to Metropolis finally with the understanding of what he can and can't do. He couldn't stop the storm from causing all the damage in Smallville any more than he could stop what happened to Jenny Vaughn. All he could do was what was within his power. His triumphant return to Metropolis isn't with a giant battle, but by saving the same little kid he did earlier. This time, the kid's falling from a roof after chasing a cat on top of the building. A Luthor bot is there, because they are how Lex is trying to prove that he's all Metropolis needs. But before the robot can help, Superman swoops in and saves the day. He tells the bot to tell Luthor he's back in Metropolis. Then he reintroduces himself to the boy, who says that people call him Trev. Clark replies, "Nice to meet you, Trev. People call me Superman." I think Superman for All Seasons is one of the best superhero stories in all the best possible ways, and that's why it's one of my favorites. It's Clark trying to figure out who he is, not who Superman is, not who a hero is, really who Clark Kent is. Even after he leaves school in Smallville and has a job at the Daily Planet, he still isn't sure of himself. I think that's what I love most about this story. Superman learning to become Superman, but with Clark Kent firmly planted right there. It's Clark learning how to be who he wants to be while still doing what he set out to do in the first place. He wanted to help people, but in doing that, he wasn't sure if he needed to be something more than he was comfortable being. There's this old theory by some in comics that Bruce Wayne is the mask of Batman. That Batman is the real character in the story, and Bruce Wayne is just a vehicle to get him there. I think Superman for All Seasons really shows that Superman really is just a persona Clark puts on to help people. Clark Kent is the real main character. Part of Clark obviously bleeds through the Superman uniform at times, and that's when we get really good stories. But Clark doesn't want to be some all-powerful being. He just wants to do good. He just wants to help people. And the journey we're taking on in this comic, I think, shows that perfectly. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please hit the subscribe and the like, and I'll see you in the next one.